Hey everybody, Michael here, and welcome back to PlayStation Homebrew News. In this episode, we have a new PS5 firmware update that just dropped, bringing us all the way to PS5 13.60, an interesting WebKit bug that affects both the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4, and then major progress from two PlayStation 5 emulator projects, and much more. Let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. So first up, we see that Sony has released PS5 system software version 13.60. The complete version number that is shown on Sony's support page is 26.05-13.60.0. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Sony's public release notes are typically pretty short, and they say in this one that messages and usability have been improved on some screens, and that is pretty much it. Now, of course, a small public changelog does not necessarily mean that the update itself is small. So firmware updates, they can include things like security changes and other fixes that are not fully documented for users. So we have already seen that some of the security researchers and developers in the scene have already started comparing this release against previous firmware releases to determine what's changed behind the scenes. More on that in just a second. As always, if you care about future homebrew or jailbreak possibilities, always stay on the lowest firmware possible. Now, flipping over to the PlayStation 4, what we can see here is that there is no matching PS4 firmware update at this time. So Sony's PS4 support page still lists firmware 13.52 as the current version. So to be clear, the PS5 received version 13.60, while the published PS4 version remains unchanged. So one thing to note is that the existing PS4 13.52 notes mention security fixes, but there is no new PS4 release accompanying this PS5 update. Now, what we saw was that Console Facts shared a post stating that Gezine's zero-day kernel exploit was patched in firmware 13.60. So the attached Discord message from Gezine says that the report being written was patched at 13.60. So this does not automatically give the public a new jailbreak, and it does not tell us when or whether the research will be released. It does, however, suggest that firmware 13.60 closes something researchers considered important. So this is another reason why anyone preserving a lower firmware console should avoid updating. Next up, Nathan Fargo published information about a WebKit Type-Confusion Bug that also affects the browser builds used by the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4. So this issue involves WebKit and JavaScript core behavior, and Nathan provided a public proof of concept through a GitHub gist. So that code is obviously very valuable because other researchers can study the behavior, test the affected firmware, and just use it as a starting point for additional work. Now, the important bit of context is that a WebKit bug by itself is not a complete jailbreak. A browser entry point is only one part of a potential chain, so other vulnerabilities and techniques would still be needed to escape the browser environment and gain deeper access into the system. Even so, this is meaningful research for both console generations, and it is now available for the community to examine. Now let's look at two experimental PS5 emulator projects. KytyPS5 has received several new automated builds since the previous episode. The latest build in the Roundup was dated July the 22nd. So the project includes several running or in-game examples, including Dreaming Sarah, Minecraft Legends, and Silent Hill, as well as we've seen that SharpEmu has also moved forward, progressing through Beta 4 to version 0.0.2, Beta 5, and this build was released on July the 22nd. So a couple of examples with the SharpEmus is the Demon Souls remake, Dreamin' Sarah, Void, and Dead Cells. So again, both of these projects remain experimental. A game appearing on a compatibility list or reaching an in-game state does not mean that it delivers a complete or a full speed experience. Still, having these two actively changing projects makes PS5 emulation very interesting to watch, especially with all the things that's kind of been going on with Sony here lately in regards to physical media. I definitely think that the reason that these projects have started to explode is simply because people want more options, and yeah, it looks like the PC is going to be one of those. Now, moving into Homebrew projects, there is a PS5 Linux loader now that provides a browser-based control center for configuring and launching Linux on an exploited PlayStation 5. So its dashboard is served directly from the payload or on port 8090, and from there, users can work with boot settings, payloads, files, FTP features, and an Android companion application. Now, the repository also discusses dual boot and grub functionality, although those areas are clearly marked as works in progress. So the appeal here is bringing several Linux-related tasks together behind a much more approachable dashboard. Next up, we have SaveSyncPSPC from DIY Technologist, and this is a PC side bridge designed to work with Garlic Save Manager on the PlayStation 5. So the goal is to move supported game saves between the PS5 and local PC save directory. It supports PS5 to PC and PC to PS5 conversion workflows with both a browser interface and command line tools. Now, Garlic Saves handles the console side of the process, including mounting, decrypting, uploading, and really re-encrypting the saves. So compatibility is implemented on a per game basis. So this is not a universal converter for every title. The tool also creates backups before applying the conversions, which is especially important when working with save data. Next up, we have PS5 Payload Manager, which has made a sizable jump from version 0.3.3 to version 0.5.0. And so this update adds payload favorites, allowing frequently used payloads to stay pinned near the top of the dashboard. It also adds a clearer launch indicators, so you can see which payloads were started during the current session. There is a new in-memory session history with an accompanying API endpoint, plus French, Japanese, and Korean language support. Existing users can install the update from inside Payload Manager without replacing the original ELF file or changing the autoloader configuration. Overall, this release is focused on making regular payload use quicker and easier to understand. Next up, my own Universal Payload Sender application now has its first formal package release, and that is going to be version 0.1.0. And this is a cross-platform desktop application for sending payload files over TCP, and you can think of this as something very similar to Netcat GUI, except for this runs across systems. So I have package builds available for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and really you just choose a payload file, enter the target device address, and send it using a Netcat style workflow. This release also improves the payload picker, locker, and input validation. If you try it, feedback and issue reports are always welcome over on GitHub. And then finally, here is a quick look at the latest and greatest game listings available for PlayStation 5 jailbreak users. On the PlayStation 5 side, the list has Dragon Ball FighterZ, Bubble Bobble, Sugar Dungeons, Jagged Alliance 3, and I would highly recommend you check out, especially if you like some of the older versions on the PC back in the day. Cobra Kai 2 is out, Tetris Forever, and then a couple of F1 games, and then we had FIFA 21, and then over on the PlayStation 4 side, we can see we got Sand Speed Camel Racing, Megaland 11, Hillbilly Doomsday, which I definitely think I've got to check that one out. And then we can see we've got Jazz Punk Director's Cut. And as always, don't forget to support the developers when you find a really good game. Now that wraps up this episode of the PlayStation Homebrew News. Which stories are you following more closely? Firmware 13.60, the next WebKit research, PS5 emulation, or one of the new Homebrew releases? Let me know in the comments. And if this episode helped you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with somebody else following the PlayStation scene. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Michael out.